Alright, this critique is for Evan Hillis, and so there's a couple things that I see right off the bat. The first thing is the how it reads. The problem you have right now is you have the castle reading well. This castle reads well, but you're kind of confusing the bridge, and then this castle disappears over here. Um, because it's too light and it doesn't read well enough, and it's in the tree line. The other thing too is that you want to pay attention to your you want to pay attention to kind of the where the eye is drawn, and so you have three major components here. You have this castle here, you have this castle here, and you have this ship. Okay, I do not even, it takes me a while before I even recognize something like that. And the problem with all three of these things is that they're all on the same plane kind of concept. You do have a background here, and you have the middle ground here, but you also have the foreground there, and that's good, but the problem is everything else is the same size. And so what I mean by that is that if you look at your pillars are exactly the same size, and it's everything is perfectly kind of that that exact same principle. And it's okay to repeat your shapes like that, but the problem is you're not really showing me any depth. Everything is, exactly the same size. The other thing is your perspective is off. Looking at this, if I'm breaking down your perspective, so you've got kind of a 1 point going on, and I'm going to kind of bring this down here like so, and I really can't, you can kind of fix the perspective here, if you block this off as a square. But the problem is that perspective is coming over here, but again, these perspectives are not. So even if I were to kind of block this off, these perspectives would be a lot sharper up in here. And then this, you would almost see the top of this. I mean, looking at this, you would see a lot more of the top, the way your perspective is now. So you need to fix that perspective. And personally, I think you intended the perspective to be across here someplace. And then if that's the case, your upper limits here are going to really be sharp. Same thing up here, you're going to see a lot of kind of skew on this. And you're going to see a lot more of the tops. That's where you need to fix the perspectives. The next thing is what I would do is, let's see here, let's grab this branch here. The problem with it is it's kind of in the way. It's covering up your bridge, and it's coming. The bridge is your basically draw. From there, I'm seeing everything else, if that makes sense. It's leading me to the next section. But the problem is you've got it so that it's leading you to. I'm going to just deselect this. Let's start just kind of really quickly roughing over here. And let's paint some bridge here. And put the matching side. And then let's grab some of this here. Let's fill back in some of this so we can just kind of. So you see, by doing this, by putting that one branch down, what happens is you now create I think a better line, because now what you've got going on, let me just kind of finish painting here, because now what you've got is you've got the aspects of how do I want to put this? I'm just kind of, you've got your aspects of your brights leading us to, I'm just going to kind of wipe that off. Now I can look at this and I can go, okay, this here is pointing to the ship. The ship is pointing up to the castle, and the bridge is leading over to this castle. And so I go in much more of a rectangular, whereas before I was kind of just drawn back and forth. And the problem is the way your eye is being led is, I'll just do this in green. The way your eye is being led is, I see this branch because it's the darkest focus, and I just get pushed off the page because the bridge goes this way. And if you look, everything kind of points this way, completely off. So that's another aspect that you want to do. And then that being said, what you also want to do, like I said, just kind of building up this, put in some more branches. So, all right. So basically, after all this is being said here, you've got, if you get your paint, your build your wall in there. Now this is leading, but it's twisting back up to the castle, and that now becomes the focal point. The next thing I would do is, in all reality, what I would do is I would lower this down smaller. And the reason I would do that is because then you have an emphasis on, you start having an emphasis on other aspects then. And what that means is you're slowly, this way, you would be slowly kind of building up priorities, okay? And that's the biggest issue I think you have, is you don't really have that priority of what's going on, because right now everything's equal size, and by making this a little bit smaller like this, it's not much, but the priority now becomes the larger castle here. And then what I would do is I probably would grab maybe even parts of this here, and I'm just going to kind of clone this over, and by putting more complex imagery in there, what I'm doing now is I'm creating more interest into the building itself. So you can see, by putting that interest in there, it becomes much more unique. And I could probably play with it a little bit more and put more depth and detail in there. But that type of interest in here is really what's going to sell my piece. The more complex shape is this over here. So that's kind of what I want to focus on, is this complex shape. Okay, then the next thing is, and I'm just going to kind of tightly clean up some of this stuff here. The next thing that you want to pay attention to is the contrasting image. So what I mean by that is that with with the depth, as you get closer, you're going to get more detailed. So what that means is everything else right now has got the same muted tone, but if I take, and I'm just going to kind of play with this here. Okay, so if I take this here, and let's just copy this, and let's go with hue saturation, and let's add a little bit more dark. Actually, let's do this instead. Let's go to adjustments, let's do levels, and we add a little bit more darkness, like so. And do you see how it's very, very subtle? Like so. It's very subtle, but it starts popping your shadows forward. It starts giving me more depth. And what I would do is, let's merge this, and what I would do then is start building in some of these darker shadows to show me that this is in a forward motion. The other thing is get your lighting in there, and just you can see how by building some simple lighting gives me a lot more form in those particular trees. And then I can even go here to kind of a screen, and this is going to brighten it up a whole lot, but I'm trying to keep this. But by brightening up that contrast, like so, that gives me a much more interesting foreground background element. And things are starting to pop out a little bit better, and you can kind of go in here and just kind of putz and paint and stuff like that. But as you get closer, you want a lot more contrast, a lot more depth. And so that leads me to this foreground piece here. I'm just going to quickly okay, and then again, doing my quick levels here. Do you see now how that starts popping out? Now I'm getting much more of a foreground, more of a background element, much more interest going on, and I think that's kind of what you want to achieve. This foreground element is now framing. Let me create a new layer here. This foreground element is now framing this here. All right, it's stopping me from going any further, but it's also drawing my eye over here to the ship, and then this is bringing it back up. So again, I think a little bit more playing with the contrast and stuff like that. I would probably go to my curves here and go into my default, and I would add just a hair more. And I tend to like darker works. I think it pops a little bit better, more saturated. But just simply doing a little bit like that, you see how now mine versus yours looks a lot more entertaining, a lot more interesting. And then you can actually add in, I would add in some of this fog here. Let me take this off first. So I would add in some of this reflected surface. So this blue is actually going to pop up brighter on this rock here. So you really want to pay attention to the reflected lights too. Alright, and you can actually define a little bit more of your information there. So again, going from this to this creates a lot more interest, if I would say, because now I'm looking forward to things, and I'm looking through the composition, and I'm not being kind of pushed off the page. All right, so I hope that helps.